I first want to talk about the immensity of history in this room. Just the lineup of women that was seated here that built this institution brick by brick, sometimes using just their wits. I feel humbled. I feel incredibly emotional that I got a chance to walk in their footsteps. And I understand, when we talk about standing on the shoulders of giants, it was really humbling to me to see those giants in the flesh here on this stage. I want to acknowledge a massive absence in this room, and that is the absence of my co-conspirator, Eunice Musime, because my story at Akina Mama is inextricably linked to hers. My success at Akina Mama is Eunice's success, so I cannot tell the story of my time at Akina Mama without talking about Eunice. So, it is a shame, really, that she's not here tonight to receive her flowers and see herself being celebrated, and also see all the incredible work that she's put in up to this point of 40 years of an institution. I'd like us to give a raucous round of applause for Eunice in absentia. When the former executive directors were seated here, I remembered something funny that happened when I just joined Akina Mama. So Leah Eryenyu preceded me, and at the time I joined Akina Mama, and it seems that this is a story that repeats, there is a constant dip of no resources. And at the time that I joined, that was exactly the story. And Isaac, who's the IT guy that has served Akina Mama for a really long time, may correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember that we were so poor, we were so resource-starved that we could not necessarily get new email domains for new stuff, so you kind of inherited somebody else's. It's kind of like places where there's a shortage of land. Have you heard of the phenomenon of people inheriting other people's graves? Because there isn't sufficient space, and so that's kind of how it was. So I actually inherited Leah's email, and sometimes, I constantly wondered who this Leah was, and it's absolutely amazing to put a face to the name. And tonight has been overwhelming because it has also been a crash course in the institution's history. So many people that I'd heard about, whose history was not familiar to me. Their faces have become familiar today, and their contributions have become familiar to me. Because I said my story and Eunice's is inextricably linked, I just want to talk about one of the experiences, or two or three, that made me find Akina Mama to be my political home. Exactly 1 month after joining the institution, I participated in the very first protest in my life. There was a woman who worked with AASI. She was their communications officer, and she died from complications after giving birth. She had been treated, or she had been admitted at this very expensive private hospital. The narrative is that if you go and seek private care, it's better than public care, and therefore your life should be guaranteed, but she died anyway. So a group of women, a group of institutions came together and quickly organized and went to protest at, I think this is still the name, IHK, for Ugandans who may know it. We had a protest there, and I remember feeling so comfortable and feeling that this is exactly where I belonged, in a home with rabble-rousers and ungovernable women and people who did not just speak but actually went out into the streets. Let me tell you something. At that time, we did not have a healthcare program. So we did not have a budget to participate in issues related to women's health. We did not have a budget to hold a press conference, and yet a press conference was held, and we financed it. And that is because we understood that these were not single issue struggles, as all of us have, you've heard over and over again. We found a way to make the resources available for us to participate in that protest. And I felt, I think, perhaps comfortable, unknowingly at that time, not having truly known Akina Mama's history, that it was a history that, it was an institution that was put together by political dissidents, by women that were trying to find community and to find political language and to put together a struggle in the diaspora. And so when I later on learned their story, I felt that I was a child who belonged. I felt that my formation, my forging as a feminist was in the perfect crucible, and that crucible was the institution that is Akina Mama or Afrika. There was another incident, maybe 2 years later. When you speak to the public, protesting for a woman's life is nothing controversial. Nobody really, of course, except Uganda's militarized police, would be against you protesting, a woman who has died from complications from childbirth. But there are things that the public will agree are controversial, and you as a good woman should not participate. So there had been I think it's called a special committee or an extraordinary committee of parliament that was put together to investigate cases and incidences of sexual violence in school. I remember that it was headed by Honorable Anna Adeke Ebaju. And we were called on to make a presentation before that committee. And we quickly collected a couple of Amazons at the time to go and present and talk about, all these incidences of sexual violence against children in school. And because we were Akina Mama or Afrika, the inevitable question came up. Do you believe, well, I don't remember the question was, but exactly. But the issue was the members of parliament had included, under incidences of sexual violence, consensual same-sex relationships. So, this issue of lesbianism, queer, whatever, yeah? What do you have to say about that? And I remember my heart pumping. I remember my heart beating so fast. And I was like, this is how I get trapped. You say you're a feminist, this is the moment of truth. Whatever you say here is going to be recorded in the Hansard. And 20 years from now, your children, your friends are going to come and find how you betrayed the gays. And I remember, and this is something that I drew on over and over again in my time at Akina Mama. Every time there was any sort of conflict, I just went back to the charter. What did the charter tell us? I went back to the core principles that we had agreed on. And I liked in that moment that even as my heart beat, the response I was going to give to the member of parliament was dovetailed exactly with my institution's position. I believed in the idea, in the practice that people who were adults could engage in same-sex, consensual relationships and sex. And this was a position that Akina Mama espoused as well. So there was absolutely no contradiction, and I gave my answer. And I remember the member of parliament said, because homosexuality is illegal in Uganda, your response should be stricken from the record. I remember that so clearly. So even this answer that I felt I gave so bravely, well, no longer exists in the Hansard because it was stricken from the record. Because the crime was so egregious that it could not even be recorded. And so for me, those are the things that made this work so worthwhile. Fighting and placing our struggles within some of the things that were controversial and some things that were less controversial, but all, still very important to the work, but maybe not necessarily embedded in our work plans and strategic plan, the way that we had envisioned. We still found a way to ensure that, the work continued. So I'm really in awe and very humbled, that I and so many comrades, some who are here and some who are not, have contributed to creating, to reaching this milestone of 40 years. I think it's very important for me to stress that when we're talking about 40 years of Akina Mama, we are not talking about an abstract institution. We are talking about people. The very beating heart of the institution is the people that make it. So to the very many responses that the executive directors gave here, I would say that the staff of the institution are the very drivers of the institution's work. And so their well-being and their welfare is paramount beyond anything else. Because if that falters, that is how the cracks begin to appear. That is how the fighting begins to appear. And so then we can ask ourselves, shall we be celebrating another 40 years of Akina Mama? I would like to come back and have my friends dance the way we saw some of our elders dance tonight and say that the feminist work is still continuing. But siblings, friends, comrades, if you can allow me to be solemn for a bit, and this is where I become a killjoy, perhaps. We are here in celebration, but there is also an undercurrent of discomfort, of unhappiness that has pervaded our movement. When I think about the work that the institution has done, it is too important. It is a legacy worth fighting for. And yet cracks appear in all the milestones and the achievements that we're celebrating tonight. And we cannot leave those cracks unaddressed. This is what happens. When there are rumors of something, sometimes rumors are completely true. Sometimes rumors are half-truths. Sometimes rumors are blatant lies. But when they remain unaddressed, what happens is they congeal and they become the truth. And that truth becomes a barrier to solidarity, to building the movement, to continuing the movement. And that is not something we can afford to do at this point in time, at this point in history. Because siblings, comrades, we are at a moment of rupture. You know, when Antonio Gramsci talks about the old world is dying, you know that famous quote? The old world is dying, and there is a new world that's struggling to be born. This is the time of monsters. The monsters is the rise of ethno-nationalism, the rise of Trump. The monsters is the rise and the turbocharging of misogyny. The monsters are the climate crisis. The monsters are the cutting back of official development assistance. Those monsters are waiting eagerly to devour us as we fight amongst each other. They'll eat us for lunch, and they'll pick their teeth with our bones. I'm so sorry for sounding so morbid, but there is no other way that I can sound this knell. The point that I'm making is that our solidarity, our unity is paramount above anything else. If our movements, if our institutions are to continue and to survive another 4 decades, we need to look inwards. We need to think about where we've gone wrong. We need to think about repairing bonds. We cannot afford to put our heads in the sand. But I don't come only as a bearer of bad news, right? I have a vision, and I hope that people share in this vision with me. As I was walking in, I saw a tree, a picture of a tree, a drawing of a tree. And I thought, how interesting. I was thinking of an imagery of a tree I was just thinking about the next 4 decades of Akina Mama and the feminist movement in Uganda and on the African continent. I imagine an institution such as Akina Mama as a baobab. You know what a baobab is? It's that massive tree that lives for generations, for hundreds, for thousands of years. But recently, I found out that baobabs die too. That they die too, and they've been dying in quick succession, mostly because of climate change. The point I want to make is, as enduring as the baobab seems, it can also die. So it needs nurturing. If we look at Akina Mama as a baobab, with its roots sunk deep, with its branches creating shade from Cape to Cairo, if I can borrow Elizabeth's language, creating a shade and a space and a haven for feminists to come and commune. And the baobab's leaves and its trees are kernels of knowledge. And those kernels of knowledge fall down and new little baobabs emerge. Isn't that what we want for our movement? We have to understand the staff of the institution, all the people that put together this overwhelming beauty that we're enjoying tonight. They're the custodians of the baobab. Without them, the baobab dies. They're the ones who are etching the history of the institution on the baobab's bark. And generations to come will come and learn, will come and be nourished from this tree of life, literally, because that's the work that women do. That's the work that feminists do. It's the work of nurturing life. It's social reproductive labor. It's that affective labor. So for me, as I leave, even in this moment of crisis and some rifts and some unhappiness that, we must address, I'd like to leave with that image, that then becomes what we aspire to. Understanding that the baobab is critical. We cannot do away with institutions, even with the limitations. I know that this is a constant critique. NGOs, institutions have limits in terms of organizing, but the baobab is steady. That is where you come back all the time. That is home. The little baobabs can grow. They're nimble. They can go and respond very quickly. But the institution has its roots deep. And that is what you call home. This is where you come and find refuge. So also, to feminists that are younger, that are coming, let us not dismiss institutions. It is because of institutions that we are. It is because of an institution such as Akina Mama that I was able to sit at someone's knee. I was able to sit at Dr. Sylvia Tamale's knee and learn my feminism and become radicalized. So the work that has been, the work that is yet to come is work. Yes? That is worth fighting for. So let's get our hands dirty. Thank you.